Hi, I'm Michael Tinker, an engineer with CA Datacom. This presentation covers a small example program using the Hibernate Object Relational Mapping Library with Datacom. It's a very bare-bones program. It maps MUF active task, a dynamic system table in MUF, to a Java class through configuration XML that Hibernate uses. Then the program will accept a DBServ connection URL as a command line argument. We'll use the Hibernate session factory to connect with server specified by that URL and do a Hibernate transaction trees MUF active task as a list of POJOs. Then for each task object in the list, we'll print the request sequence number and the current status. The way we overview this on the slides is start with where the configuration files belong in the Maven standard directory layout. If you prefer a different build tool like Gradle, there would just be a few small translations to your environment. But we'll look carefully at the XML to configure the session factory, and then look at the XML that maps the table schema to the POJO, which is just a Java bean. Finally, there's just a snippet of code needed to set up a session factory, create a session, and then execute a transaction that retrieves the contents of MUF active task. So here we have Maven standard directory layout. The key XML files are this datacom.cfg.xml and the task.hvm.xml. Datacom.cfg.xml is going to set up a Hibernate session factory and also specify the mapping resources that will be available to that session. If you are building in Maven, then you can use the unqualified name of any resources in the source main resources directory. So, a couple of essential items to watch out for in the CFG XML are the fully qualified name of the Datacom JDBC driver and the fully qualified class name of the Hibernate dialect class for Datacom. And that is available to you on request. We have a data dialect available as a Maven package jar. Then the hvm.xml is configuration to actually map the schema of the MUF active task table to this Java bean task. Here's the XML for the CFG, the configuration, and notice we have on the first property, we've got the driver class, which is the JDBC driver for Datacom, and then we here have the fully qualified class name of the Datacom dialect. Other properties appear, and in fact there are a great many further properties that would need to be taken into careful consideration for a production deployment. For example, the connection pool size probably should be bigger than one in a production environment and so forth. Then the mapping XML, once you kind of stare at it, it's almost straightforward because we are going from properties. In the Java bean, we kind of want to serialize each row as an instance of, and then we're mapping to columns in the MUF active task DST. We have to give Hibernate something to use as sort of a primary key, roughly speaking, and we're using request sequence number for that purpose. So it gets this ID element in the XML instead of the property element. The Java bean is completely boring. It has the properties that we just saw listed before with the accessors and setters. Then the Java code to build a session factory, which will create sessions with our server, is very short. We have a nice fluent API here, instantiate the configuration, configure starting with the properties in our XML file, and then set one more property, the actual connection URL, which is going to come in from the command line as an argument, right? So just a nice fluent configuration API, lots of cascading. Hibernate is quite an aesthetically pleasing interface. Then the example transaction in main is the equivalent of a select star from MuffActiveTask. And you can see we built a session factory, got a current session. We create a query that is going to, in list form, be just a Java list. And then we can scan through that list, get task objects, and report on the request sequence number and the current status. This, of course, is very nice, very simple, but a lot does happen behind the scenes, and in preparation for a production deployment, you would want to consult the hibernate.org documentation in some depth. But then to invoke this example, right, we use the Moho Codehouse plugin to get everything on the class path, and here's the URL to my dev server. So Hibernate will give us a lot of logging information about what it's doing, but ultimately it concludes that this is the SQL query it should send to server to fulfill our request, and then you can see the output of our program here. We've got one active task right now, and a bit more output will follow that. But in short, this is sort of a nice entry point to just get started with Hibernate, and there are many wonderful resources to pursue as you go deeper, depending on your use case. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.